Hey guys, this is the Wiggle Man, and welcome back to Wiggle's Miniature Workshop. Today, we're going to be getting proper orky. We're going to paint some orc skin. And to start off, we're going to use Vallejo Express Plague Green, Vallejo Game Colour Camo Green, and some Glaze Medium. So to begin with, we're just going to slather all over where we want to be orky skin with the Vallejo Express Plague Green colour. So the reason that I use the Plague Green from Vallejo as opposed to other kind of brighter greens is, first off, this initial layer is going to mainly act as our shadows. And now, I don't claim to know much about colour theory, but my understanding is that we want kind of bluish shadows, but because of the size of the miniature, we don't want to lose the green on the body as well. I find that Plague Green, when it dries, it's got a very cold green kind of a look to it, where it's settled into the recesses, and that's exactly what we want to settle into our shadow areas. So you may have noticed this model was base coated black initially, and then I primed it with a white zenithal highlight through my airbrush with a white ink. Piece of advice: if you do decide to do this, I definitely suggest putting a layer of varnish over the top of the white zenithal layer of the model, because I find that Vallejo Express, Army Painter Speed Paint, and even Citadel Contrast tends to reactivate white ink if it's not been sealed in. And if you don't have an airbrush, which I understand not everyone does, a white spray rattle can work just as well, or dry brushing white over the model. Again, look up Slap Chop, it's all over YouTube. I've used it on a couple of models as well. So we switch over to a here's one I prepared earlier, as you need to give contrast paints a good amount of time to dry. So into my little mixing ramekin, I am adding 1 drop of the Vallejo Game Colour Camouflage Green and 2 drops even of the Glaze Medium. And then I take my big mixing brush and I mix it all together thoroughly. So because every single different type of paint will have a different density of pigment in it, I always, after I add Glaze Medium into the paint that I'm using, I'll always test it on my hand first. It's why you'll find that my hands get so messy while I'm painting. And here I'm going to start putting in the initial highlight. You'll notice straight away I've taken far too much off of my brush. You want to get a good balance of how much you have on your brush, because if you've got too much on your brush, you are essentially dabbing the pigment onto the model and it will come off very, very strong. However, after a little bit of wiping away, you can see I'm putting the paint down and it's allowing me to kind of just sketch in where I want the highlights. As for where I'm looking to place my highlights, of course, on the top of the head, it's basically, because we've done a zenithal highlight on the model, we're pretending that the light is shining from the top down to the bottom of the model. So we're going for the tops of the skull, we're picking out the edges, so we're picking out his brow, we're picking out his nose, we're picking out the edges of his ears, we're picking out his lips, and we're going to do that with a wee dollop of the paint on the brush. We're also going to attack the tops of his lips as well. This is purely just to add a bit more interest, a bit more depth into the model. You know, traditionally you think about orcs, they've got basically their teeth going way up into their gums, creating a lot of texture around their lips. And again, we're essentially just trying to avoid anywhere where the Vallejo Express, the Plague Green, has settled. So we don't want to go right into the crevices of the muscles. We don't want to go directly under the cheek, but we do want to highlight just above the cheek. So as you're using paints mixed with the glaze medium, you'll notice again, eventually your brush will begin to run out of pigment and paint on the brush. So at this point, I decided to tackle the cheeks. Using the very, very small amount of pigment that I have left on the brush, I can build up very, very, very light layers around the jaw to make a really nice transition from underneath the underneath the cheek down to the jaw. And that was achieved just with a very light scratching motion. We again did something similar with the muscles around the model as well. Again, we're just looking for areas where the Vallejo Express paint has essentially separated out, where it still looks quite a bit white through the green. And finally, we're attacking the knuckles around the fingers from where they're tensed up. We want that to be a brighter, lighter colour. And you'll notice that I will be dabbing the paint back into my mix quite often, just to kind of accentuate, add a bit more pigment, add a bit more brightness, instead of having to go over it layer by layer. So at this stage, I'd say you'd have a really, really good kind of a base skin tone for a battle-ready orc. Even just putting the contrast paint on, that's fine if you want to take it to the tabletop. If you want to take it to the next level, I take some Vallejo model colour, basic skin tone, I mix one dollop in with my already mixed camouflage green, and then I put 2 more dollops of glaze medium into the mix as well. The reason I do this is because, as you'll see now, the basic skin tone is a very, very dominant, very pigment-rich paint because it's from Vallejo's model colour range. They're a lot thicker paints. And I just want, again, the next stages to be subtle highlights. So here I am once again. I'm wiping some excess paint off of the brush onto my hand. Use a paper towel if you want. And we're going into zoomed in mode. So with this mix now, we want to be picking out mostly facial highlights. So you'll see here, I'll do a line across the bottom of the lip, and then I'll start dotting the mixture over the lips as well. Again, the reason I do this is because I wanted to get a kind of a textured effect over the lips. So now we're simply just going over all of the sharpest details around the face. So the top of the nose rim, we're going for the tops of the eyebrows, we're going for the tips of the ears, we even go on to the tips of the knuckles as well. What you want to imagine here is what parts of the skin would be tight. This is why we've added in the pale colour. You clench your fists and you open your mouth wide, you'll notice that, and I bet you're doing it right now, you'll notice that the colour goes out of your skin, essentially, and that's what we want to be essentially replicating with how we're painting here. So that to me is a pretty cool looking orc. I'm really happy with that. I think that would look great on the tabletop. But now we're going to take it one step further and we're going to put in the rest of the facial details. So to begin with, we're going to paint the tongue. I used Vallejo Game Colour Warlord Purple, one of my favourite paints at the moment, and I painted that in at the back of the tongue. I then took Vallejo Game Colour Squid Pink on the same little ramekin I use and painted that in the front of the tongue. I then mixed the two colours together and essentially wet blended them on the tongue to give that transition from dark at the back to light at the front. And then for painting his teeth, we're going to do a very, very similar thing. We're going to start off with Vallejo Game Colour Bone White. We're going to block in all of the teeth. Now, one big piece of advice on how to make teeth look good is try your best not to paint over the teeth. If you have essentially dark shadows already in the recesses, you don't want to paint over those. That does a lot of the work in making the teeth look like the teeth for you. And then once again, we highlight the tips of the teeth with Vallejo Dead White. Whilst we have the dead white on our palette, we're going into zoomed in mode and we are going to put just a wee dollop onto his one eye. On his other eye, I'm going to use Vallejo Express Gloomy Violet, and I'm just going to paint within the line on that. And then finally, we're going to add Vallejo Express Plasma Red onto the eye. And this is a very, very vibrant Express colour. Well, that'll do it for this video. It was just a quick one just to show you how I paint orc skin. If you liked it, subscribe, like the video, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye for now.